Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about trans voice and the relationship that trans people have with their voice, and as well as talking about my relationship with mine over the course of my transition. So if you're interested in hearing more about feminizing your voice, my journey with vocal feminization, or just in general are curious, keep watching. I've made a few like this in the past, but this is really not one of those one video topics that it's not going to magically be fixed as soon as you pass or as soon as you transition. You're still going to be self-conscious. So my last video I did 5 points that made it easier to work on your voice. This is my kitty. Her name is Coco. And she needs a lot of love. The hardest aspect for me to get down was feeling comfortable with my voice enough and feeling comfortable in public, and something that not a lot of trans people talk about, but feeling comfortable to speak on voice chat online, because gamers and the internet in general are very transphobic, especially gamers that have trouble getting girlfriends. I'll do a whole video on this at some point, but I think they are very threatened by trans women because they run into trans women on their video games more often than they run into cis women, and a lot of these people tend to cross over into the incel demographic who resent the prevalence of trans women on the internet, so they use that as an excuse to pick apart anyone who's female presenting or sounds female. And it's so bad that a lot of my female friends who play on the internet and play games get accused regularly of having a voice moderator or voice modifier because they sound like a girl. So you truly can't win, in my opinion, but the more you work on your voice, the more comfortable you'll feel. And there was a time when I would never speak on the internet on voice chat or anything, and I wasn't comfortable with it, but these steps helped me overcome that, and I want to help you over. First, your trans voice is not about being 100% passable. Your trans voice is simply about feeling comfortable enough to be yourself. When I first transitioned, I didn't even live as a woman because I did not think that I passed. And because of it, I think that I did not work on my voice as much as I could have. Your natural vocal range is pretty easy to figure out. You just have to get a recording of yourself talking at a natural pace and you can get an idea. But a lot of trans people, they push themselves too far out of their natural range because they want to either emulate another trans person or they're just desperate to make it sound as different from their natural voice as possible. But in my opinion, the farther out of your comfort range you go, the less natural it will sound. It's like the same difference as speaking softly and breathily versus speaking like a falsetto, because nobody talks like this. Let me give you an example. When I first transitioned, I tried to be up here, I tried to be as high as I physically could go, and it was incredibly hard to listen to because you could hear my strain. Contrast that with lower, less feminine range, but it is more within my natural capabilities, so I sound less forced while I'm trying to do it. It's not going to be a big change, but it's about being better every day and feeling more authentically yourself every day. Step number 2 is vocal inflection, which is, I think, the most important part of a passable trans voice. Again, it's not all about passing, but a lot of people want to pass because it makes their life easier. My voice itself still rests in an androgynous range. There's a certain range that is typically male and there's a certain range that's typically female, and when I record my voice, I still fall within an androgynous range. However, I think that I have gotten a fairly feminine vocal inflection, which has helped me a lot. There's no exact instruction on how to have more of a feminine vocal inflection, but it's usually the easiest step for trans women because you tend to speak in a way that emulates the people you respect. Like, a lot of gay men are told that they have a feminine inflection, and there's no real science behind it. My theory is that gay men just speak like other gay men that they look up to, and it's kind of self-fulfilling. When I was an actor and I did like theater and shows, the number one vocal note I always got was, work on your inflection. Your inflection is too feminine. Despite the fact that I, to me and to most people, sounded like a man and had a male vocal depth, I still sounded feminine because of my vocal inflection. And a lot of people think that like a slight up lilt at the end of your speech gives a more feminine inflection. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're struggling with altering the pitch of your voice. That's the first place to start. The third, and in my opinion, probably the hardest one, at least for me, is finding your low. So everybody has their highs, the peaks, and the valleys of their voice. My voice goes up and then back down and then back up, and it can go really low. But when I'm talking, I don't go there. My natural low when I was talking used to be very low because I spoke dynamically and I liked it. There's a lot going on. Find your own natural low and work on it every day. That doesn't mean take your low and go up here, because you can't. You're going to go down and up as you speak, but you can slowly incorporate raising that low in your voice so that you naturally don't go down as much. When you're talking up here the whole time, it doesn't sound natural. So if your low is low and you can't get it that much, better, you can work on making it maybe less loud, incorporating more breath. Work like a yawn, like, nobody yawns like, well, and if you do, then sorry. But my point is that you can slowly incorporate raising the bar. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. It will take time. It has taken me years. My old videos, you would not believe how many people gave me comments that I had to delete about how much of a man I sounded like. Even in my vocal feminization video. And I do think I sound a lot better than I did those like years ago, but I still have a lot of self-conscious feelings about my voice. And those aren't going to go away overnight. A lot of it, I hate to say it, is dysphoria. And dysphoria is really hard to totally shake. But I promise you it'll get better. Number 4, this is probably the most important lesson I learned from speech therapy, and that was think about the onsets of your words. When I was younger, and you can see in my old videos, I had a fairly loud and dynamic voice, and the onsets of my words were particularly very hard. Like, think about the word how. Do you say how, or do you say how? The difference between the ha and the ha sound is essentially the difference between a masculine and a feminine onset to your speech. The onset, in my opinion, is the most subconscious dialectical choice that people make. Like, nobody thinks about it. But do you say always, or do you say always? There's a slight difference. And the only difference I can physically notice is the amount of breath that goes into it. Before, I would take a deep breath, ha. But now I try to instead of popping a balloon, imagine filling up a balloon and slowly releasing the air. So ha versus ha. That is a soft versus a hard onset. And if you can find those in your voice when you start a vowel or when you start a ha sound, working on those specifically, you can get away with having a really deep voice if you have a feminine lilt, if you have soft onsets, and if you incorporate more breath into your voice. That's not to say you want to talk like this, but a lot of my vocal feminization came from incorporating a breathier tone and less volume in my onsets. Take a really deep breath and speak the words like it's a sigh. Now, you don't want to sound like a sigh in day-to-day speech, but as an exercise, sighing as you release your words can give you an idea of the difference between a breathier, softer approach and a harder approach. You know what I mean? The fifth point, and probably the easiest thing just to change and instantly do, would be to download a vocal pitch analyzer. There's an app that I use, and it's just voice pitch analyzer. It's free. All you do is record like a 1-minute memo of your voice, and it'll keep track of how low and how high you go and your median range. The typical male vocal range is 85 to 180 hertz about, whereas the typical female range is between 165 to 255 hertz, and a lot of people fall within the androgynous range. And in this app, all of those ranges are helpfully laid out just so you can get an idea of your objective pitch. Now, do not be too hard on yourself about it, because the truth is that almost every trans person I know, in terms of hertz, falls within the androgynous range. My highs fall within the female range. My lows do fall within the male range, but my median is androgynous. That being said, combining my pitch with my inflection and with the onsets of my words, it generally gives a female picture. And the way I know this is that I get ma'amed on the phone or even on the internet. I don't get accused of having a voice changer because my voice isn't that high, but I'm usually not berated by transphobia when gaming, and that is really uncommon because gamers are the worst. All sorts of people fall all over the spectrum of vocal pitch. My mom is a woman with a very deep voice. Anytime we go out in public, people comment on her voice, and subsequently mine too. And at some point, you just have to roll with it. Something important to keep in mind is that no rule states that women have high voice, men have low voice. That's just gender roles, that's just societal expectations. So you can't impress that on yourself. The only reason I'm recommending that you find your pitch is that it is very hard to get an objective reading of how you're doing when it comes to vocal feminization. And that this can give you a numerical value. Maybe take a recording of yourself pre-transition so you can compare it to yourself post-transition. That way you can actually see how far you've come. And do not, I repeat, do not disparage yourself if you're in the androgynous range, because a passable voice does not have to be a universally female voice. Learn to embrace your deep voice, because a lot of men do find it sexy, a lot of women find it sexy, and that's not the only reason, but what I'm saying is that there's always a silver lining. Sometimes I think about Adele or other female vocalists who have really beautiful, resonant, lower vocal ranges, and I remind myself, you know what, that's me too. A lot of cis women, I'm sure, would be very envious of my resonant baritone. You know, there are altos, there are contraltos, and people come in all shapes and sizes. So learn to embrace your unique you. To love and embrace your singing voice. You will not be able to find your trans voice if you cannot find your singing voice. You don't have to be a good singer, but you have to do it. You have to try. And I will say, I used to be too afraid to sing as a woman because I just thought my voice was too deep. I thought it wasn't appropriate. And more I'm realizing that I have a beautiful, unique voice. And plenty of women wish that they could hit a low E like I can. And it's okay to not fit into a box, because the truth is that's what makes you special. I think dysphoria is what stops us from being able to appreciate our deep voices as trans women, and I find that the people who most often call out or criticize my trans voice are fellow trans people. And in general, I think I have been criticized more often in my life by trans people than I have by transphobes, mostly because transphobes, they just do what they want anyway, and it's easier to ignore them. We as trans people are hypersensitive to the trans voice. We're hypersensitive to dead giveaways of other trans people because we see what we hate in ourselves. All trans people can relate to how uncomfortable it is vicariously living through somebody's dysphoria. That's why if you have another trans person tell you your voice isn't passable, tell you your voice is too deep, just remember to take it with a grain of salt and take it for what it is. Not that it means that far and away your voice is this way, you're not good enough. Just don't criticize yourself and don't use another trans person's hyper fixation on the qualities of your transness make you hyper fixate on those qualities. Because the truth Your dysphoria is never going to go away completely. But people don't talk about this enough. Cis people experience dysphoria too, because the idea of gender has been so spoon-fed to us that it isn't real. It is a stereotype, it is an archetype, and not one person 100% falls into any umbrella. And accept that. To stop telling me I don't pass, just kidding. I just want them to stop telling anyone they don't pass. If somebody asks, hey, do I pass? Be honest. That's different than a trans person just trying to exist, just trying to be themselves, only to have a bunch of trans women on the internet tell them, you're not passable, you're ugly, you're too tall, your Adam's apple's too big. That's harmful, that's hurtful, and in my opinion, that's just as bad as the incels that tell each other that they'll never get a woman because their jaw is small. My point is let's normalize the fact that not everyone is gonna pass at all times, and that's okay. So why make other people experience worse dysphoria just because you're giving them tough love? Most trans people have had enough tough love for a lifetime, including me. And I have reached a place where I really do love myself, and that's why I'm able to be candid about this, but I want everyone to be able to reach that point too. Passing is really important, especially if you live in an area where it is not legal to be trans, or maybe hate crimes are especially prevalent. The truth is that trans women, specifically trans women of color, are murdered every day. And if we don't take that seriously as trans people, we could be putting ourselves in danger every day. So it's okay to want to pass, and it's okay to want to protect the trans women around you by letting them know, hey, here's how you could pass better. But let's not criticize each other anymore. Let's bring each other up. If you ever feel like your voice is a dead giveaway, your height is a dead giveaway, your whatever is a dead giveaway, just remember that you will always be so much more fixated on yourself than anyone else will be. You're always going to notice the little details more. You're always going to pay way more attention to your voice, to your appearance. I remember when I started this channel, I was going to make video updates on each little increment that happened with my transition, but that's not realistic. The things you'll notice will be in retrospect, not in the moment. Like, I can't tell you how interesting it is for me to look at old videos of myself, and I can't even pinpoint exactly where my voice or my mannerisms or everything changed, but I know that they did. So just remember, nobody looks at you the way you look at yourself. Love yourself, be kind to yourself, and do not tear yourself apart for something that is not your fault in any way. When my voice changed when I was younger, I went into such a deep depression and I couldn't put my finger on why. But what's important is to not dwell on that. I think that it helped me, in the long run, spend more time developing my voice, spend more time learning to love my voice instead of just loving the idea of what I thought I was at the time. I hope that this video was able to help somebody, because I wouldn't be here today and able to do this and really transition or be myself if it weren't for the videos before me that I watched that helped me. So good luck, learn to embrace your trans voice, sing like nobody's listening, dance like nobody's watching, and give yourself a hug because you deserve it. And if you like this video, please like, please subscribe. I am gonna try to post more. I don't know what the future holds, but all I know is I'm optimistic. Bye. Trans voice is the term I use to describe the very real experience of not quite having a male voice, but not quite having a female voice. Deep voiced women have this, feminine men have this.